Hello everyone, welcome to another human analysis episode. Today I'm following again games by Annie Wang. This is from the same tournament as the previous human analysis. This is the Berkeley Summer IM norm. This time Annie had the black pieces against Rawl Alicock. As far as I could find, Rawl has been active since 1997, has a rating of around 2280 if I'm not mistaken. And in this game, they started with d4, e6, c4, knight f6, pretty standard, everything pretty normal. Bishop e7, just normal development. And here Annie decided to take on c4. I personally struggle with this situation, whether to capture or not to capture. Typical ideas involve trying to play c5 and around the struggle for the center. But I decided to go with c4 and queen c2. Now, what I have seen very often is queen c2 is not directly aimed at recapturing the pawn, but more towards playing e4 and trying to put pressure on the knight. Again, with the capture, black is giving up the d pawn, which controls e4. So that's a theme. The a6 move, a bit tempting to play b5 after, or possibly directly, but there are usually problems for white on the queen side. Oh, sorry, for black on the queen side. The minority attack usually proves very effective, and it's not what we have in this game. Game continue with bishop d7. Now white decides to recapture the pawn, and a very interesting idea, bishop c6. This is not new by any means, but I still find it interesting. Now black is trying to control the center, the e4 square with the bishop. A normal developing move like knight c6 would not really accomplish that. And because the pawn on e6 can't really be pushed directly, alternative ways of developing the light square bishop had to be found. And so this is a way to solve that. Bishop f4, knight bd7. Now, in this position, the knight on d7 is trying to control a little bit the e5 square, but I would say that white has accomplished a very successful opening, and there's nothing to worry about in this case. A bit of interesting moves, just knight jumping around. We can see the trip that it does. Going here, going here, going here. 3 knight moves directly. 1, 2, and 3. This tells me that there isn't an easy way for black to develop their pieces. Maybe this is lack of preparation, or maybe this is theory, I'm not really sure, but if anything, I would say that white is better at this point. I'm not a fan of queen b1. I would prefer maybe queen d2, something along those lines, but it doesn't really blunder anything. Exchanges, and still a little surprised not to see e4 right now. Seems like a good time to start bringing stuff, but that's okay. h6, again a little mysterious. I don't really understand this move. Played continued. The knight going back, the rooks still not connected. It seems like really black isn't really sure how to proceed. Now finally e4 happens, and right around this moment I can really see how white's activity is starting to cramp black's position. The knight on b4 looks a bit weird. It doesn't really do anything. One might say that it's preventing the advance of the d pawn, but I don't think it really accomplishes anything. Goes back, knight c6, captures, and queen d3. In this position, I believe that white had a better alternative. I believe that white should have gone with e5. The same idea, cramping the position, and in this case, there has been imbalances. There's an exchange, and white enjoys the bishop. It only makes sense to me to capitalize on having the bishop, and e5 opens the long diagonal for the bishop. Let's not forget, this pawn is not defended. Well, after the knight moves, it won't be. So there are themes around that. The c file is also open, or semi-open, or it's available for white. So there can be pressure on this point. I would have definitely considered playing this. Potential line would have been knight f5, and then even d5. d5, it seems maybe a bit premature, but it allows something like this. Sorry, not this one. This would be really good for black, because this move is available, protecting pretty much everything. But bishop d5, bishop d5, and there is a lot of pressure now against b7, mentioned before. This would be fatal because of the simple capture here. So knight c6 is needed, and after this, white enjoys a slightly better pawn structure and definitely more activity. I see more plans or easier play for white in this case. I would say that white has a slight advantage. But this is not what happened. In the game we had queen d3, rook in f, d8, f4, knight goes back. This is maybe the second time that a knight is sent back to c8. d5, all seems normal to me right now. You have to open the diagonal. Putting some pressure. Knight d6 and e5. I still believe that white is at least slightly better in this position. Some tactical shots around here, but nothing to be really concerned about. Queen f2, knight b5. This is a rather long game, showing around 50 moves. The pawn finally falls, which has been mentioned before. And this is another interesting moment, f5. In this position, if I look at it with fresh eyes, I see that there is a check available for black on the first rank. So my first instinct was just play king g2 and don't allow any activity, because white is better. White is really a lot better in this position. The bishop is so much better than the knight. The rooks are active in open files, doubled. Black's position is really cramped. I would say that the only active piece that black has is the queen, and it's at the edge of the board. You can't really compare the queen to the bishop and the rooks that white has. So I would say there's no rush, just play normal, king g2, avoid any activity, avoid any counterplay. Yes, I'm aware that the pawn would hang, but white can still put a lot of pressure. Something like that would just be terrible. This would be game over, absolutely. King cannot take, and there's a double attack on the rook on d8. If rook takes f7, then just simply rook takes d8 with check. So that's just not possible. If instead black were to play queen b6, this is an exchange that white can welcome because the bishop is so active. Again, if something like this were to happen, bishop a6, and where does the knight go? The knight has no squares. So just king g2 I think would have been fine, but in the game we have f4, and f4 I believe is premature because right off the bat we can see that this pawn is not protected. There's no one protecting that pawn. So it's not easy to see an attack against it, so I can't really be too critical of this, but it does allow unnecessary activity. This is a nice tactical shot. I believe it over the board this would have been a bit hard to find. This knight suddenly becomes really active, and this move is just a really strong move by Annie. Among the various threats there are, just queen take rook d3. There's also rook takes b2. There's also knight takes f5. There are so many things happening just because of this move. And I think I just give credit Annie to finding this move. White goes bishop e2, and now knight c4. Attacking the e5 pawn, attacking the a5 pawn, and attacking the b2 pawn. This is of course a very strong threat, going for the two rooks. So the knight finally becomes active and useful. We have that. Game continues. If we check the material right now, Annie is at least temporarily a pawn up. So from that little cramped position that Annie had to having an extra pawn, even if it's temporary, I would say this is a good improvement on her position. f6, knight b4, attacking the rook, protecting the pawn on a6. Rook f5, protecting the pawn. There is of course an attack against the black king. Rook d8, queen e3, and g6. In this position, Annie blundered big time. I don't know if maybe she was low on time or not, but this is a complete blunder, and I'm surprised that white didn't capitalize on this. The right continuation would be just to take here, threatening checkmate. And how does black respond to that? The best solution is to just remove the pawn and play a queen down. But this is of course losing. So another attempt to just take the pawn, but after king h3 there are no more checks, and the checkmate threat is still there. So this was completely toasted. Instead, white played rook f2, which is it has a discovered threat, a discovered attack threat, but when you see that the other move was winning checkmate and whatever, you kind of feel bad about it. And Annie probably saw it, and that's why she played knight d5, ignoring the pawn on a6, of course, because she's going for the pawn on f6. Now we have this, and game continues. Black is still a pawn up, and there is still pressure against f6 and f7. All of that is taken care of, and the discovered attack on the queen, of course, black cannot capture on a6. So game continues. Black remains a pawn up and seems to be doing just fine now. At this point, I am completely sure that black is winning, in spite of the imbalance of knight versus bishop. Everything seems fine, and this is, I would almost say that these are like maybe not only moves, but very easy to find moves. All of this is to me very, very simple, and we reach this position, or this situation actually, where white is trying to prevent the black queen from entering the king area, king side, and eventually Annie finds a way. Of course, at this point, white blunders. They make a mistake, and in maybe time pressure, maybe bored of the position. I don't really know how to justify it, but there's a mistake, of course. In this situation, the pawn on g4 is hanging. It was actually hanging from before, as far as I could see. I don't see a discovered. Oh yeah, sorry, discovered attack. Queen c3 would have, because the line that I was looking at was maybe something like this. But there's this check, and the rook is not protected. So that's not possible. So rook d3 makes sense, but the pawn is still hanging. The pawn on g4 is still hanging, and it takes with the knight. It's very interesting to see that there was another tactical shot here. Black could have taken with the rook. Rook takes f3, and upon recapture, there's just queen. Queen takes g4, king f2, and that would have been a fork. So the king has to move to a square where it cannot protect the rook, and then it would be a piece and a pawn for black. In the game we had knight takes g4, then h5, and the knight being super useful again, attacking the bishop, protecting f7, protecting g6, protecting the rook. Everything happens because of this knight. This knight is just a monster right now. This is one of black's best pieces. Bishop e2 allows, I believe this is a forced checkmate sequence, but they play it up until here. Of course, white cannot capture on f3 because there's this fork, and the king moves to e1. There's still the fork because the bishop would be pinned. If the king goes back, black can enter with check, and checkmate would soon follow. So this is another victory for Annie. I believe not her best game. I believe maybe some opening preparation was required to improve on this, but still a victory is a victory, and she did find some very, very strong moves over the board. So congratulations, Annie. Hope you keep winning. Hope you keep winning. Yeah, keep up the good work and keep inspiring us. Thank you for watching, and see you soon.